What's the creepiest place you've been? I investigated a fatal fire in the middle of nowhere in the woods. This house was set off so far into the woods, it took me forever to get back there on a dirt road. I pull up in front of the house, and of course the whole thing is boarded up. But the house is huge and old. I got creepy feelings just looking at the place. The front door was boarded up with a bit I didn't have, so I had to climb through a window in the back that the family had left open. As soon as I stepped foot in the house, I felt like everything was wrong. I shouldn't be there. I shouldn't walk around, and I sure as hell shouldn't take pictures. It was that feeling like when someone is mad at you, and the slightest thing will set them off, so you just kind of sit there in silence, hoping they'll forget you exist, so you can do your thing. But I was there to do a job, and so I started to do my walkthrough and take photos. This was clearly a set fire, and the guy who died had been murdered by his grandson. But I still had to document each area of the origin thoroughly and do diagrams and all that because fatalities are a big deal. The entire time I'm walking through the house, it feels like there's someone standing behind me, looking for me to slip up just once. Like when your boss is there the one time and he's just staring at you, waiting on you to fuck up so he can correct you. I finished the first floor and head down into the basement where the guy had died. It was mid-July, and it was hotter than shit on asphalt. But as soon as I got to the basement, it was like somebody turned on the AC. Of course, it was pitch black in the basement, because A, it's the basement, and there's not much light down there on a normal day, and B, that's where the bulk of the fire was, so everything was pitch black. I walked through the basement into the bedroom. The fire hadn't reached the bedroom, as it had been started at the stairwell, which acted as a decent chimney to prevent fire spread throughout the basement. But it did get hot enough in this room that the outline of the guy's body was in the carpet right next to his dog's body's outline. As soon as I entered that room, every single alarm bell in my mind was screaming, "Get the fuck out, you moronic jackass. Have you not seen a goddamn horror movie?" This is where the angry ghost of Gramps murders you with a hatchet. But I had a job to do, so I stayed. Took my photos and collected samples, searched the whole basement for anything to give an idea why this would happen. I frequently had to leave the basement to go outside to give my brain time to stop freaking the fuck out. And every time I walked back into the house, everything in me was telling me to leave. The whole time I was in the basement, it was like someone was standing in the corner just watching me. And of course, I was working with my tiny-ass flashlight that's basically useless, so that didn't help much. The last time I left the house, I crawled through the window and noticed that it had gotten cloudy and really windy while I was inside. Thinking it was a random Midwestern storm, I walked around the deck and looked out into the yard to find a buck just fucking staring at me. I'd never seen a deer look angry, but it looked furious. I just kind of shrugged my shoulders and half waved, and it turned and walked away. As soon as it walked away, the wind died, and it started to get warm again. Creepiest house I've ever been to, and weirdest shit I've ever experienced. Edit. Words. Double edit to answer questions. It was investigation for an insurance company, so I don't have the pictures. Confidentially and all that. And I had a shitty flashlight because that's the one my boss gave to me, and I hadn't bought a better one yet. And the reason I was alone was because I do about 80% of my scenes by myself. It's part of my job, honestly. Back during Vietnam, my unit got hit hard in the jungle. We split, and one group went to help find the VC who attacked us. We stayed behind to evacuate the wounded. The 4 able bodies were supposed to hop on with the injured and go. We load up and one chopper doesn't make it back, so we 4 can't load. We would be grossly overweight. It's late. The sun is low. Pilot says he will drop these guys and come back for us. So we divvy up ammo from the wounded and squat in an open field. 20 minutes go by. Then an hour. 2 hours. It's now pitch black and we're seated in a grassy field. We spent the whole night looking at every stick and leaf that twitched. You could feel the tension. We sat in a star, back to back with our rifles pointed out. We knew we couldn't repel the attack, but we decided to take as many as we could before being overrun. If overrun, we would pull grenades and do everyone and the VC for 25 feet in every direction. The tension was thick. Sunrise, we heard the Huey coming. On the way back, he had a hydraulics issue. They worked all night to fix it so we could get flown out ASAP. All 4 dust-offs had issues and took bullets, so that is why the other one didn't return the first time. That field of grass was extremely spooky, even if it was just in our minds. I had a friend who cleaned out and sold foreclosed homes for a living. He once took me on a ride to a house he had a photograph for the bank after it had gone into foreclosure. From the moment we got there, it was unsettling. It was in the area of a ski resort, and the neighborhood was wealthy, but once we stepped inside, it was clear that it had been used as a kind of boarding house for resort staff. Numbers outside of each bedroom door, large closets/weird spaces turned into bedrooms. The place was filthy, with black garbage bags everywhere, pizza boxes, booze bottles, like clearly a party house for staff, but recently abandoned. At one point, I was on the ground floor, and my friend was in the basement, when I suddenly got full-body chills. I was standing in the kitchen, and there was a bathroom next to it with the door closed, and I somehow knew that there was someone hiding in the bathroom. At the very same instant, my friend called me down to the basement, where he found a back corner which had been converted into another sleeping area. There was a television still on, just showing static, and a kitchen knife on a crate next to the mattress. That was the moment I stepped directly behind my 6'4", 300-pound friend and told him we had to get the fuck out of there. I'm pretty sure the home was being used as an illegal boarding house for undocumented resort workers, and I honestly felt bad for the terrified kid who was still squatting in the basement, but I sure as hell didn't want to find him. More or less a combination of creepy and sad, but Cambodia. Went with family to see Angkor Wat, huge temple, an absolute marvel, was featured in Tomb Raider, I believe, and stopped in the town center for a bite to eat with our guide. We wandered away from the guide just to explore a bit, and we were approached by a young girl, 15 to 16, carrying what looked to be a sleeping toddler. She asked us to buy milk for her baby, and we obliged because, hey, babies need food. Just as we were about to walk into the store, our guide spots us and tells us to get in his car. We used it for transportation to and from a bunch of temples. The girl then starts screaming profanities at us and the guide, and we pile into our car. She started banging on the windows of the car while still screaming after the door was closed, and surprisingly enough, the toddler still didn't wake up. We asked our guide what the fuck just happened, and he relayed this to us. Apparently in Cambodia, and some other countries, gangs will profit off of not only sex trafficking from children, but also a form of pity trafficking. They will take a small child, a toddler, and drug them so they look as though they're sleeping. They'll pass the child off to a young girl who will beg for food/money, etc., and pose as the toddler's mother. Then, she'll pass the child off to a new girl who will repeat the act. They do this until the child wakes up, will feed them, and then start the process again. As the toddlers get older, they'll be taught to try and sell things to tourists. If they fail to meet a quota, they'll sometimes lose limbs, fingers, hands, arms, legs, and will then run a story about how they stepped on an old landmine. This is actually somewhat possible, as the country is still reeling from the impact Pol Pot had, and there are still unearthed landmines. But the issue is that less than 1% are close enough to the main city/Angkor Wat, which is where a majority of these children were. We were shocked, to say the least. This seemed kind of far-fetched, but what else would we believe? We did some research online and found stuff about the sex trafficking, but not much about the toddler swapping and child mutilation. When we went into town the next day with our guide, what did we see? The same toddler being passed to a different girl, still knocked out, still in the same clothing. Definitely creepy. I loved Angkor Wat, and I thought it was beautiful, but I don't plan on going back there anytime soon. I was working at Livingston Mall in New Jersey at Toysam in 2011-2012. This mall is dirty as fuck behind the scenes. It was supposed to be a mall for the rich, as Livingston is full of rich people but no one came because they went to the vastly superior Short Hills Mall. Anyway, one of my things is exploring new places, and this was the first time I was able to explore this place. We had pallets that we needed to get rid of, too, and my boss gave me the job of making them disappear. So anyway, one day I'm traversing the labyrinthine back halls of this place, and I come upon a door that seems to be in a weird place. I open it and peek inside, and it's like a 3x11-foot mini hall, maybe a bit longer. In it is a long series of shelves with nothing on it, and it seems like this may have been pet of something at some point. There's leaves on the ground, roaches both living and dead on the shelves and floor, and a set of overhanging tube lights that had at best 3 semi-functional bulbs casting a pale, eerie glow from them. Of that, there's chains hanging off of them. This thing looked and seemed straight up out of a horror film. Amusingly, my boss, when I told him and showed him the place, said, "Why am I not surprised you found a place like this?" Because he knew I liked exploring, and it's just something I do. Never found out what the place was for, but it did make a good place to stow some wooden pallets. Paramedic here. I've been in people's homes that are literally insane and have seen some unexplainable items like condom icicles. Take a moment to process that. I've seen weird shrines worshipping things like a squirrel/bird skeleton. People living in a literal sea of cockroaches, not to mention the booby traps. Get a call for a person down in an intersection. Respond early in the morning around 5:30, just before dawn. We approached the intersection, lights were still on, and there was a fog bank that hadn't cleared yet, which was also very rare for our town. With low visibility, we proceed with caution, and we see a power chair on the sidewalk. One that the elderly drive like a rascal. Anyway, the power chair was empty. We exit the ambulance and walk up to the power chair to investigate. The fog bank made it extremely eerie and quiet. I take a few steps down the sidewalk and notice a small smear of what appeared to be blood. In a short distance, I find another smear. I tell my partner to follow me. I think I have something. I soon realize I'm on a trail of smears of blood that are gradually getting bigger. I'm assuming that a limb is being dragged across the ground and progressively getting worse and bleeding more. I begin to notice a faint sound in the distance, and I realize whatever was leaving the smear of blood was ahead of us. We walked for not being able to see much, and the sound gets louder. It's a moan. The moaning was mixed with a gargling sound. Whatever was up there was alive, but as I would find out, it shouldn't have been. I see a figure in the air, not touching the ground, and I stopped dead in my tracks. My partner, being less cowardly than me, walks ahead. I follow close behind him, and we come up to the figure. It's not floating. It's caught on a chain-link fence, and it's a person. This guy's clothes were all torn up. His skin was cold and gray. His head was hanging low, and his body was positioned like he was being crucified. And he had no legs. Yes, no legs. Hence the power chair. He had been there all night. Once we cut him down and gave him glucose, he was able to tell us his story. His power chair had run out of battery on his way home from the liquor store. No one was around to help him, and he didn't have a phone, so he tried to crawl to a payphone. But his sugar got low, being a diabetic, and he got caught on a broken chain-link fence and ended up climbing halfway up it. This is the closest I've ever been to coming across a real zombie. But since zombies don't exist, it was just a diabetic double amputee on a broken fence. The scene was straight up out of a movie and felt so damn real. When you're a teenager and you first get your driver's license, you like to stay up late with your friends, but there's nothing to do at night for a bunch of 17-year-olds, so you go find fun. There was a place that we all called Shady Town here in New Jersey. I don't remember what it was officially called, but I remember it was around Montgomery, New Jersey, and I think it has since been demolished. I remember we parked at an elementary school, and just behind it there was this place. It was an entire decrepit ghost town, with houses, a school, and a psychiatric hospital all falling apart. We went late at night a few times. We explored some of the abandoned houses and the school the few times we went. It was creepy for sure, but after having been there a few times, we actually felt kind of comfortable around there. Comfortable may be a stretch, but we weren't exactly scared. I remember sitting on a bench outside of the school once, passing a Poland Spring bottle of vodka and orange juice around with my friends, like 17-year-olds do. It's not like we'd go there to hang out. We were there to explore, but it got less creepy. Jim only came a few times, but always seemed almost reckless in the way he moved about the horror movie buildings like he was doing a walkthrough with a realtor. He'd see a closed door and open it up and walk right into the middle of the room. If you've ever been exploring abandoned, creepy-ass buildings, you'd know that you tend to creep about kind of slow, peeking around corners and through cracked doors before moving on. Jim just moved around like he belonged there, which he really did everywhere we went, not with a swagger, just comfort and confidence. On maybe our 8th or 9th visit, Jim found a basement window into the psych hospital. The hospital was always hard to get into. The doors were always locked and the windows boarded up. We were all cool with exploring the houses and the school, but the abandoned psych hospital in Shady Town was a little heavy for us. Not for Jim, though. He went right for the window, and when some of us told him not to go in there, he just looked confused and said, "Why?" and went on in. We were all true, so we went in after him, even though we didn't really want to. Our flashlights and headlamps showed us to be in a typical basement, with pipes running along the ceiling and concrete floors. It was a big room, but nothing was in it, but there was a door. Of course, Jim walked right over and went through. The other 4 or 5 of us, it was a while ago, I don't remember, froze up, but Jim hollered, "Come on!" So we went. We were in a really long hallway with concrete floors and cinder block walls, lit only by our flashlights. At least we were towards the end of the hallway, and we could see the wall at our backs. At this point, I started to get really scared. Me and another guy said that we didn't want to go down that hallway. Jim said, "What? Do you think that there are ghosts here?" And I said, "There might be." Jim yells down the hallway, "If there are any ghosts here, do not fuck with us." This made me really pissed off, and I asked him what the fuck he was trying to do to us. The other guys were really scared too, but Jim laughed at us and said that there aren't any ghosts here and started walking down the hallway. We were pissed and scared, but we kept going because who wants to be the first to bitch out when you're 17 and abandoning creepy, abandoned psych hospitals with your friends? We went into some rooms that had a bunch of old, disgusting linens and mice in them, but then eventually got into the morgue. It was almost cathartic to reach the morgue, like when the monster in the horror movie finally shows itself and is visible for the rest of the movie. Yeah, I detected that this was an extremely fucked up place to be, and that we should definitely not be here, and that if a demon was going to possess me or tear out my throat, it would happen in this room. But at least I didn't have to worry about it anymore. This was the hot spot. We stood still, and even Jim stood still for a second, and we flashed our lights on the old abandoned mortuary refrigerated chambers where the bodies were stored. And here's the reason the story is about Jim. He went right over there and opened one of those doors, pulled out the gurney, and laid down on it. It's worth noting that the gurney itself was gross, regardless of all the implications of death associated with such a thing. He asked for one of us to push him in and close the door. We all said, hell no. He actually started to get kind of pissed off and called us pussies, which caused Ed to go quietly push him and close the door. We just stood there and waited for what seemed like a really long time, but who knows? It was probably 30 seconds. Eventually we heard a knock, and we all jumped out of our skin, but it was Jim wanting to be let out. So Ed opened the door and pulled the gurney out. We were really stunned at what we just saw. Who in their right mind would do such a thing? Why? We all had the bravado thing going on, but that is one of the scariest things I can ever imagine doing. He went over to it like he had to, like it was his job to go into that refrigerator chamber. When he got out, he just laughed a little bit. He started opening other doors and pulling out the gurneys while we hung back toward the entrance. He looked like he got bored and left the room. Jim started to go back down the hallway to explore again, but we had had enough. Fuck you, Jim. We're not going down there. We were fucking leaving. We walked back to the window we crawled in from and helped each other out. Jim followed us like a toddler who was told he can't have candy before dinner. When we started immediately walking back to our cars, we were all quiet. We were totally freaked out by Jim. And when we got near the cars, he said, "What's wrong with you guys? Listen, of course there are spirits and shit. There just weren't any there." And we said, "Fuck you, Jim." Then we probably went to Wawa. Jim is now some kind of lawyer, last I heard.